Good morning, everybody. It's Friday again, and you know what that means, right? It's Q&A time. It's time for you to ask me some questions. And I've had some questions across the couple of last days now, and I'm going to answer those today. But if you're going to watch this live or later, and if you have still some questions about some of the topics that I'm going to talk about, or some of the topics that I have been talking about the last week, about the four pillars, for example, for scaling your agency. So, to repeat again, if you have questions about either communication or your team or your systems or your leadership, then definitely it's time to ask those questions. And you can have an agency, you can have a business. These kind of principles that I'm talking about can be applied to any business, any type of business, and especially more of the digital, the online businesses that have a distributed team. Because in this day and age, every company has more and more outsourced people, right? They are across the globe, they are everywhere. And that's always causing like a lot of issues for communication. How do you communicate in a good way, in a structured way to your team if they're across the globe, if they are distributed? How do you make sure that you have your systems in place so you can actually give your team the tools to work on what they should be working? And how do you make sure that your team composition is good? How do you know that you have the right kind of teams or team members in place? And do they are they communicating with each other? All of these things are something we can talk about. So let me just start with one of the questions that I had from Ewa. And she asked, like, okay, is what you do also based on Six Sigma? Because what is Six Sigma is really a tool to improve business processes, to remove waste from business processes. And I'm always talking about how you should, remove that waste, remove the time waste, remove any kind of bottlenecks from a process so you can improve your systems, so you can keep scaling your business. Because if you have some systems in place, can be a delivery system, can be an onboarding system, can be your sales system or your marketing system. If there are roadblocks or bottlenecks in there, maybe it's relying on one person in that process. Maybe it's relying on your customer giving you feedback before you can go on. These type of roadblocks can make your system really slow, and you can waste a lot of time if you do not fix those. So we look at that, we analyze these business processes, and we make sure that we identify the bottlenecks and then we solve the bottlenecks. And that's the whole thing, right? That's how you improve your business. That's how you can keep scaling. So what I'm talking about, if you've seen the videos before and the trainings about removing waste, these kind of principles are indeed what Six Sigma talks about. I put my own twist on that often because I come from the corporate world where I have been using agile principles. But I would say they are related, because if you look at how Six Sigma uses or the tools that they are using to improve business processes, then a lot of these things also come on the surface when you're using Agile, right? And I found a good overview of this actually in a site, and let me just share you this information right here. Let's see if I can pull this up here. So this one here. Okay, here we go. So here, this article talks about like what are the 8 most important Six Sigma tools to help drive change. And here it says like Six Sigma is the methodology to help eliminate waste and inefficiencies within business processes, right? But then if we look at what tools are they using, for instance, they use the value stream mapping. This is exactly the training that I made like a couple of days ago. And if we're looking at Agile, then, and I also found like an article on how they can work together, and they for sure can get together or can work together, right? And a value stream map is one of the tools where we can calculate lead time, wasted time that is in your processes. So that's already something we can use on both ends. So I'm using this for sure. I say I use the Agile principles, but you can say I use Six Sigma principles. It's the same almost, right? This one, cause and effect analysis, I'm not using this one. So this is only Six Sigma in my world. Then you have the 5 whys. This is actually a good one. I need to try this one. So just asking 5 times the why question. Why is this problem happening? And why is that situation happening? And if you go pretty deep, then you can discover a lot of things already. The Kanban system, yeah, we use that. We use that, and it depends on the business. It depends on how you are working. So I also always say like, it's not because we implement Agile or anything else or Scrum or whatever that we're going to change everything within the business. It's really about looking what is currently happening within the business and what can we improve. If we can improve by using a Kanban system, we should do that. If you're already using some kind of Kanban system, it's about improving the visualization or some of the statuses, some of the little things, right? So it's not always about just changing everything. Using some kind of a system, we don't want to just overhaul all of it because your team still needs to work. You still need to produce quality. You still need to deliver. So it doesn't make sense to just start changing everything. It's about small improvements week after week after week. The Pareto chart is something specific for Six Sigma. It is not something that I'm using. Could be interesting because it talks about the 80-20 rule. So 20% of the input produces 80% of the output. So it's about looking at what we should focus on, right? We should not focus on the 80% that doesn't deliver anything or that delivers minimum amount of value. We need to focus on the processes that can deliver good quality value in most of the cases. So I'm working with a company right now, and their most important process is the delivery process because they are creating websites. So we need to focus on that process to improve that one. They also have the onboarding process, which is also important. But in the end, the quality comes from the delivery process. So it makes sense to put a lot of focus on that process. Process mapping, absolutely, we do that. Visualizing your processes is so important. I cannot say this enough. If you do not know how your process looks like, then you do not know where to improve it. So please start doing this. I have a training about this as well. If you don't know where, just leave a comment below and I'll send you the link. Project charter, absolutely. Absolutely. We need a charter. We need something where we can say, okay, this is the document that we are going to use where we put our, how will I say, our objectives, our values, how we want to work in this project. And a project charter can be more extensive, can be like your company charter as well, where you put your values, your goals, your way of working, what is the definition of done, when is something really done as a delivery, right? Or your team, how do they want to communicate? This is something that you can discuss with your team, right? If you put the rules on your charter, how you want to work, then it's clear for everybody. If something happens, then you can always say, hey guys, we talked about this. Remember, it's on our charter here. Look, this is the document, one PDF document, one small document where all the things are on, and then you can keep them accountable. Otherwise, like it's what I said before as well, like unwritten rules, well, they're not rules, they don't exist, right? You cannot refer back to them. So that doesn't work. Make sure that it is on paper somewhere. Racing matrix. This is an interesting one. This is something I use as well. And I will make a training about this as well, because it's really nice, again, to have a visualization on your team and why, like every team member has a responsibility, has an accountability, has a role in some of the processes. So if you can, again, map this out, then this is really valuable. And we have an exercise for that as well, which we can implement. This will also tell you for a specific person, like if you see here, it's one of the columns says you, and there's a lot of things in there. This means that you are, or you can quickly become overworked because there's too much work in progress assigned to you. Too much processes are linked to you. So you are becoming the bottleneck if you're not careful. This is the exact template that you can use to identify that. So this is, again, also a tool that I use. So I would say 6 of these 8 tools are pretty much the same for Agile or for Six Sigma. So if, Eva, you asked me the question, do you use Six Sigma principles? Then I have to say yes. I don't call them Six Sigma principles. I hardly call them Agile principles because most of the people, most of the marketing agencies that I work with don't really know what Agile is. But in a nutshell, it's really about improving, optimizing processes, eliminating waste from the processes, making sure that you know where the bottlenecks are, making sure that we know where to install improvements, where to fix that, right? And it starts with visualization of those processes, but you will quickly see that people are connected to that. And then you have to take a look at your team. And if you look at your team, what you will discover is how do they communicate? And this was another question from Joe James, like, what are some tips on how to manage and communicate with your VAs, for example? And I'm not a fan of using the term VA, but everybody knows these terms, and it's about people that are living in the Philippines, for example, or living in other countries. But it's not about specifically VAs. This principle is about distributed teams. So it's not even a problem of VAs. It's a problem of distributed teams. Having a team that is not in the same location, it's about a team that's not sitting next to you. It's a problem that exists because distributed teams are across the whole world. They are in different countries. They have different cultures. They have different languages. So it always becomes an issue of communication and managing this group of people, right? So you cannot see just communication. You have to also see the processes, because if you have a team and they're not working well or they're not effective, it could be that the process is not optimized. So they don't know how to collaborate with each other in an effective way. So if we look at the team, we have to look at, okay, they are distributed, how do they communicate? And some optimizations that it's really easy to implement in terms of communication. Some tips here is create a lot of feedback loops. Make sure that your team can talk about what's happening in the business, because they are using the systems. So if there's somebody that can tell you what's going wrong or how it could be improved, it's them. So make sure that you have often feedback moments that can be daily stand-ups, for example, short 50-minute meetings where you talk about what has happened, what are you going to do, and is anything blocking you? And especially that last question, you have to repeat that again and again and again and again. It's not because you have SOPs in place and they're so detailed that you just can say, okay, they know what they should be doing. They will never have a problem anymore. That's just not true, you know. So have that moment. Make sure that you have that feedback moment, preferably daily. But I know for some business owners, that's like, wait a minute, that's just more meetings. Well, if you keep it at 15 minutes and you don't make it longer than that, it's fine. Everybody has 15 minutes in a day. But the other thing that is important, another tip that I will give you, and something that I have talked before as well, is if you want to make sure that your communication with your team is effective, and if you make sure that your team can communicate with each other in an effective way, then also try to create hours of overlap. Minimum would be 1 to 2 hours of overlap with you, because if they're always working on a separate time zone in different hours than you, then it's going to be difficult to have that kind of collaboration. And it's not only hours of overlap with you and the team, but also between the team members themselves. Make sure that the team members themselves can collaborate on more or less the same time. And in that same time, make sure that you have your feedback moments in that time, right? So it doesn't become an issue that you have to chase people to get on that meeting. I see this happening as well. If you set up a meeting in that time of overlap, and it's always the same time, the same place, then you should not be chasing your team. If that's the case, then you need new team members. I'm sorry to say, but sometimes they are just not a good fit to work this way, right? What I also use to manage a distributed team is a good structured communication tool or a structured project management tool. This can be Trello, this can be ClickUp, this can be Asana, whatever it is. Make sure you have that in place. That's your single place of truth, I call it, right? Everything should be, almost everything should be inside your structured communication tool, your structured project management tool. And if you can combine those two, even better, right? So let me show you a little bit how I do this. So I use ClickUp. I am a big fan of ClickUp. There are other people that say ClickUp is not the right fit for them, but that's okay. So what I do with my team, so they are on here, and for example, you can already map out an SOP within your project management space. For example, for me, the client onboarding process has all these steps. So my team exactly knows what to do in each step, and you can assign people to each of those steps if you want to. Create a template for that. Once a customer is onboarded, you can duplicate this and you can assign it to all of the people. But for example, for my marketing, I do a lot of organic outreach, and I have a lot of organic posts that I do. So I have this list, and then it's about, okay, I provide the ideas, the team knows what to do with them, they have the right kind of metadata that is connected to these kind of posts. So this is also, this is communication. A lot of people think about communication that it should be talking to each other, that it should be writing messages to each other, but this is also communication. This is structured communication. You provide them with a task to do, and they can run with it. They can have some comments on it, for sure. They can put some ideas on it, or they can uh, update it with whatever they want. But this is their way of communicating with me then. And if they want me to see it, then they assign it to me, right? The same way that I use, for example, my CRM tool. So in here as well, I have a list of people in here, and what then they do is they provide me with information here on the right side. So they put comments, what has happened, what needs to be done, and stuff like that. So this is communication. This is structured communication. And another tool that I use is Slack, for example, for my communication, which is also a good tool. For my communication with my team, I avoid using email because I hate to go into my email box. Even for customer communication, I'd rather use a project management space or through Slack than going to my email box. And maybe that's me. I mean, there are a lot of other business owners that I talk to that rather use email, but email has its purpose, right? Email has its purpose for the more formal communication. You want to send a contract, or you want to send some proposal or whatever. But other than that, for me, the communication should go through your project management space with the customer, or through Slack, or make sure that you have regular feedback moments. Because this was something that I've talked about a couple of days ago with one of my other customers during a coaching session. And they had an issue that a customer was frustrated by the way they were working. Why? They were frustrated. I mean, the business owner didn't really understand why the customer was frustrated, because he was giving the customer information. But how was he giving that information? Through mail. So you had a mail thread of 5 to 6 to 7 emails going back and forth about something that you could clearly see there was a misinterpretation of the information. So yeah, because you're just sending text through mail, so you cannot put an emotion or facial expressions in there. So my recommendation was then get her on the phone, create a Zoom call, a short one, 15 minutes. People think that if they have to create a customer meeting, a customer feedback meeting, that it has to be 1 hour. Why? No. You can say what you need to say in 15 minutes, even in 5 minutes. So do that. And this is the same with your team. Again, short feedback moments, regular stand-up meetings. Get them, like if you're on the call, include that Slack tool, include your project management tool, and go through it together if they have some blocking issues. And each time you do that, you create a culture of communication, of collaboration. People like your team will get used to it, to do it like that. And that will help with the communication, because the one thing that you need to avoid at all costs is miscommunication. And miscommunication also means no communication. If you take things for granted, if you believe that everybody just knows what they should be doing because you have your SOPs and whatnot, then you're wrong. Your communication needs to happen as often as you can. And I know what you're thinking. You say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to follow up with my team every day for 15 minutes. Well, that's one of the problems that you got there. That's one of the root causes you don't have a good communication. You're not managing your team well enough. If you cannot spend 15 minutes a day communicating in a good way with your team And I'm not talking about sending some Slack message. Everybody does that. But really having a short meeting, like face to face, for example, each day. If you do not have time for that, then you have to take a look at your time management, because probably you are wasting time on other things you should not be doing. If you're the leader, if you're the business owner, your task, your objective is to make sure that your team can do their job. Otherwise, you know what will happen? They will come back to you and you will have to solve it. You will have to do their job at a certain stage. You will have to micromanage. You will have to handhold your team. So think about it. Would you rather have a lot of time where you can communicate effectively with your team and making sure that they can do the job? Or do you want to spend time fixing their problems, hand-holding them? I know what to choose. I definitely know what to choose. I'd rather spend time at building my business, creating partnerships with other people and stuff, than I would want to involve too much in the fulfillment, for example. That's why you need to have that in place. So I hope that was like an answer to some of the questions here. It's really about streamlining those 4 pillars: streamlining your communication, streamlining your team, streamlining your systems, and streamlining yourself, you as a leader. Time management is an important one, but also communicating your purpose and stuff like that. Right? So if you have those 4 pillars really streamlined and efficient, challenge, like making sure that you are fixing the bottlenecks, fixing the waste of time, then you will be able to further scale your business. Then you have that foundation in place, and whatever happens, no matter how many customers you add to that, things will not break anymore. And you will be able to keep building your business without having to spend 20 hours a day on fulfillment or on putting out fires. That's what you need to do. Anyway, hope this was valuable. If you have more questions for me, put them in chat, reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer those questions next week. Until then, see you later. Have a great weekend.